That's kind of where we are. My buddy Paul Rieckhoff, the Independent Americans podcast host, who's here with me in New York. He's able to sit through that little session at the board. It's always good to see you, my friend.
You too.
Trump's out there talking. That's why he's in Wisconsin. We almost forget about the mechanics of this presidential race, given everything that's going on. How do you think these college protests we're covering are impacting the whole thing? What would you say?
You know, I think it's illustrating the division that exists in this country, and I think you're seeing kind of a revolt of the middle.
Yeah.
Right? You're seeing that in people standing up for Speaker Johnson. You're seeing people calling out the protests, and it's some of the same people who called out the January 6th protests. So I think there's this angry middle, this underserved middle that's kind of fed up with everything that is often politically homeless. So they're really the jump balls here. We've been talking about this for months.
Yes, we have.
But now it's coming to a head. We're going to talk about RFK Jr., who's trying to pick up a couple of those folks. But Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, these are the true battlegrounds. These are the places where a couple thousand votes could determine the entire thing. And these are the places where people are frustrated and they're independent and they want options and they're watching the news. And there are people who are up for grabs who might be swayed by Trump's position on these protests or how Biden comes down on Gaza. It's still very much in play.
Let's dig into that middle for a moment. That's your specialty. It's really interesting. I thought The Hill, our colleagues at The Hill had a really interesting piece today. I'll put that headline first, and then I want to get to something else. But the headline was, Political Center Revolts Against the Fringe as Leaders Rebuke Marjorie Taylor Greene, and the protesters. So in other words, the left, some Democrats are speaking out against the protesters. On the right, they're speaking out against the fringe, the Marjorie Taylor Greene folks that want to kick out the speaker. To that point, I want to play that whole clip we teased before the break with Blake Berman speaking to Speaker Johnson about Marjorie Taylor Greene. Listen.
Let's talk about your future.
Yeah.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Mm-hmm.
No fan of yours.
Bless her heart, yeah.
Is she a serious lawmaker?
I don't think she's proving to be. No, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about her. I've got to do my job, and we do the right thing, and we let the chips fall where they may. And that's my philosophy. That's how we're governing.
Bless her heart, he says. So it's kind of interesting, right, to see the divisions on both sides. It's almost like the moderates are fighting back. I'm not saying Mike Johnson's a moderate, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think, look, most politicians are not stupid if they're going to be successful. They might be slow, but they're not stupid. And I think what you're seeing is everybody's finally coming to the realization that the middle is where most of America is. Whether you're Joe Biden or you're Speaker Johnson, you've got to push back against the extremes in your party if you want to be successful, if you want to stay in power, if you want to attract independents who make up now roughly 49% of the electorate, and especially if you want to get elected president. If you want to stay with Marjorie Taylor Greene, you're going to have a small group of people and you're probably going to lose. If you stand with Ilhan Omar, same situation on the left. So everybody's kind of coming to the middle, especially when you get into issues like national security and now domestic security and how those two intersect. You don't want a crazy extremist making decisions on life or death, on police deployments, on military deployments, on allies in combat. You want level-headed, moderate people who can put country first.
I don't think you're going to say RFK Jr. is necessarily one of those people. So Paul's an independent guy. RFK Jr. is an independent candidate. So I think people, when they talk to you, Paul, they think, well, he's going to talk about the independent in a positive way. I know you've had your issues with him and his candidacy. He's talking today about being on the ballot in a number of states, California, on and on. He also said something kind of interesting. He apparently wants President Biden to drop out of the race if he outperforms him in a 50-state poll in October. Did you see that? So
yeah.
So what's going on with RFK?
I think most independents aren't digging RFK Jr. And that's the truth. I mean, the guy was running as a Democrat just last year, so most folks don't trust him to be independent. And this is smart political strategy because it's kind of another gimmick. Yeah. He loves rolling out these things that are big news that really aren't big news, but gets us talking about it because he's got to be in the news cycle. He's got less support, less than double digits in most places. He's got limited money. He's got to create these little manufactured moments to try to draw attention and get a couple thousand votes. He's not going to win, but he's not winning with most independents
either. Gets
either.
on enough ballots.
That's the key here. He's enough to be influential. He's enough to be a true spoiler. And I think what you're seeing more and more is it looks like he's going to spoil more against Trump and in favor of Biden.
And if we look at the polling, I think we have some we can stick up on the latest data that we had on that. That makes sense, right? I think at the beginning, a lot of people were thinking, yeah, he'll take more from Trump than he does for Biden. And then some of the early numbers, here's some new numbers out here about voters who supported RFK Jr. in this three-way matchup with Trump and Biden. 31% had unfavorable views of both Trump and Biden. You look at how it splits between the independents and other groups. But the point is, at the beginning, the data was showing, oh, he might be taking more from Biden, and now we're starting to see that change.
I think this is where it's going to go, and I think it's going to stay there. And I think Trump sees that. That's why he started attacking him. I think Biden made the wrong calculation. He created a whole stand-up crew to attack RFK Jr. I think that's another miscalculation by Biden, because I think that ultimately RFK is going to help him. Now, there's also Cornel West, who you're going to talk to later, who could really hurt Biden in Michigan. So it's kind of this game of 52 pickup, where you've got to cobble together these different groups, win in the key swing states, and ultimately appeal to independence. And that's a really hard thing to do. And RFK Jr. is not doing it. He's not like Ross Perot, that was going to get 20% of the popular vote. And Ross Perot, interestingly, took Admiral Stockdale as his vice president. Just for contrast, he was a POW in Vietnam. He was a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient. That was someone that got independent support. It got national security votes, got veterans. RFK Jr. is not getting that with Shanahan, who's really just a wealthy person who's never held public office before.
Now, we got to run here in a second, but I'm going to talk to Cornel West. I think it'll be interesting about the protests, because, he was up there at Columbia, but again, not going to win, not going to be president. But the impact of these protests that we're watching day in and day out on Biden is going to
Yeah, I mean, Cornel West wants to be a player here. He wants to influence Biden and move him to the left. And if he has a couple thousand voters in a place like Michigan, he can try to make that play. And I'm sure he'll talk to you about it today. The question is, can Biden try to move those liberal voters? Does he let them go? And does he lose a 1-for-1, or is it 2-to-1 in moderates in places like Michigan? Ultimately, I think the farther Biden goes to the left, the more it's going to hurt him and the more likely Trump is to win.
All right, thanks. Fordham's Lincoln Center campus again. Police don't look like they've moved in yet. They're standing by. We'll see if that happens in the next hour or two, or before it gets dark tonight. Maybe we'll see. Anyway, Paul, thanks.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Now, Paul's Independent Americans podcast, I want to remind you, this week he's got an independent candidate from Congress from the state of North Carolina that, like all of Paul's conversations, will be interesting. So check that out wherever you get your podcasts. The Independent Americans.